My title is Different Day, Different Judge. I've decided to approach this in a slightly different way because people will put photos into competition and they will maybe not get anything out of it, or they'll hear feedback from the judge that they don't agree with or what have you. I'm going to talk about it from the point of view of you should not lose heart. For one, if you believe in your own work, you should stick with that work. But on the other side of that, if you hear the judge saying something and you can identify it, then be honest with yourself and say, okay, I need to fix this, or I need to reshoot it, or whatever it is. But you got to be honest with yourself. So I'm going to go through some photos that went through some interesting times in competition, talk about that, talk about the rules that you sometimes hear, and recognize that judging is a totally subjective, well, not totally subjective, but a largely subjective operation, and the best judges will acknowledge that. So if at first you don't succeed, you try again, but we'll go through that and I'll show you how that works out. I think I just went backwards. No? There we go. This is a white cat in a snowstorm. There we go. So here's a picture of the, anybody know what structure this is? Yeah, okay. Yeah, Susan knows it well.
Yes, and I will tell you, I was very sad the last time we went, they have painted it.
Yes.
So the texture is no longer there in the stone.
So this is the Flagler Memorial Church in St. Augustine, and I have photographed this. And as Susan points out, the really cool textures are not there anymore. They painted the place. So, but here's a photo where the judge got it right and I got it wrong. Because I took this photo and then I processed it and I really liked it. But I looked at it and I said, there's no identifiable subject here. That's one that you hear all the time. There's no strong center of interest. It's a combination of the whole thing. It's the sum of all of its parts. So I showed it to a couple of people and they said, yeah, it looks good. And I said, but there's no, strong center there. And they went, well, yeah. And then I asked an F3C judge, I'm not going to mention any judges' names tonight to protect the innocent or the guilty or whatever the case may be. And she looked at it and said, I love this. I said, well, should I enter it in competition? She said, why wouldn't you? I said, no strong center of interest. She said, you can't take that too far. Okay? So that's a rule that you hear a lot from judges. What's the subject? But there are times you will get a combination of elements and those work. So I put it in and it took ribbons in a couple of different competitions. Because the way JCC works is if you put it into a quarterly and you get a ribbon, then it goes into the annual. And so it did quite well. Okay, here's another one where, so that one was with the judge and I asked them up front. Same thing. I had this photo of the snowy egret, and the deal was that there were some branches. This is the final version, but there were some branches coming over him, and I thought they made kind of a nice frame. But I showed it to a judge in advance, not the one that was judging the competition, but one that happened to be speaking somewhere. I said, what do you think? And the first thing he said, those things have got to go. Okay. And I just took that at face value, and I took them out, and I got a ribbon. So this is to point out that I'm not out here assassinating the judges, because they get it right, and they give good advice, and you just got to be willing to listen and decide, is that really what I'm seeing? So now this is an interesting one. I polled Sean and Dave about this, And Sean said it was a little tight around the edges, and I would have to say that I don't think it's too tight, but it is right against the edges. And he said that sets up a certain tension. So I thought that was interesting. Originally, it wasn't cropped this tightly, and originally I try not to make the backgrounds too dark. You can see this background's almost completely dark. Usually I try to show what's going on in that it's a real thing. This is a gray ghost plant, by the way, in case I never knew such a thing existed, but this is a gray ghost plant that was backlighted. I caught it at the end of the day. And I put it into competition, and the judge said, I can see too much garbage, basically. She didn't quite say that. I'm paraphrasing here, but there was too much stuff in the background. So I thought, all right, let me try blacking it out. And so I blacked it out. It got a ribbon, and it actually got Nature Photograph of the Year for JCC. So you never know. But again, there's one where the judge got it right. So I didn't quit, but I did some re-editing, and that's valid. If you got an image that you realize is basically good, and somebody says, well, you just need to fix this and fix that, try fixing it and putting it back in. Sean, do you recognize this one? Yeah. So here's a photo of a guy who was playing a soprano sax at the flea market, and he was just kind of into it, and I got a couple of frames of him. I used a wide aperture to keep the background kind of blurred. And I took out a lot of garbage because it's a flea market. There was just stuff all over the place. So I kind of cloned out whatever I could. This was before the days of the magic eraser tool. But down here in the lower left corner, right where the thing ends, the instrument ends, right by his elbow, there was one shelf that some vendor had that was white. It was white PVC. And Sean was, in fact, the judge of that competition, and he said, you need to get rid of that white PVC. So I did that, and I got a ribbon out of it.
What's really interesting about that from an artistic viewpoint is how you turn the camera.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I did that intentionally because of the length of the instrument and try to set up kind of a diagonal line there, and that worked out. I have actually tried that both ways, but both horizontal and vertical, because you can do that. And in this particular case, the horizontal, I think, looks better. So once again, listening to what the judge said and realizing, okay, he's right, let's go fix that, worked. Here we have two young ladies at Bike Week who were hawking tattoos on the street. They were working for a tattoo shop, and they were out there handing, because bikers have a lot of tattoos, or a lot of bikers have tattoos. And so they were out there handing out pamphlets, and I asked them if I could take their photo, and they said yes. So I got the photo, and here's where it gets interesting. The first attempt at this I put into competition. It was a color photo. And the background had a lot of yellow in it, and the fact of the matter is that, kind of like Dave's photo, the subjects here were really kind of in the shade, and the background was really kind of in the sunshine, which didn't make for a particularly good photograph, and the first judge explained that to me. So I said, okay, good. So then I started to darken it down, and that worked. And as I was looking at it, I thought, that yellow background really isn't doing any good for me. Let's convert this to black and white, which I did. And I worked on bringing out the details. And as you can see, those particularly the one on the right has got an awful lot of tattoos, so I tried to make sure those things popped out in the photo. And somehow, in the process, I managed to get the background burned down enough that I was happy with it. And I had used a wide aperture to blur the background, but you can see now these ladies really pop out from their background, and that helps this photo immensely. So I submitted to another competition, and I saw this issue, but I didn't think it would matter in a street portrait. Unfortunately, the guy I got was a studio portraitist. The subject of this is the tattoos and the people with them, but he went down right for the wrist and said, "You cut off her hand." And I thought about that, and I said, yes, I did cut off her hand, but it wasn't coming back because it wasn't in the frame. But I thought, that's not what this photo is about, so I submitted it in another competition. And then the judge said, "I don't like photos with tattoos." Hence my comment about judging being not totally objective. But what was really interesting is he followed that comment. He said, "But this one grew on me," and he gave it an award. So, once again, this is one where I made some changes, and then I just didn't agree with the second judge. I thought, no, that's appropriate if you're in a studio, but in this situation, I didn't think it was appropriate. It's a minor thing in that case, and it worked. So you got to know when to listen and then when to believe. This one's interesting because this is Big Talbot Island at dawn, and I owe a part of this photo to Sean Trainer because we went out there. He had not been there. It was when he first moved to Jacksonville, and we went out there, and I'm setting up, and he said, "You might want to hurry because that light is fading. It's not getting stronger." We were waiting for sunrise. Well, the sunrise was a no-show, so this was the best picture of the day. But what to me is interesting and why I presented here was it did well in a couple of competitions, and then I entered it in the beaches competition. And same print, by the way. This was a print, so it's not a thing of the screen being variable. It was a print competition. And the judge said, "It's oversaturated." And I thought, really? What bothered me about that wasn't that she had that opinion. It was the fact that I had not touched the saturation. I had not increased it at all in my post-processing. I had to increase the contrast, didn't mess with the saturation. So the next year, I put it into the beaches contest again, took first place in nature. Hard to explain some of these things, but it does happen. And again, on that one, I can't say she was wrong, but for her tastes, the saturation was a little bit much. So you just got to figure out, okay, do I really need to fix anything, or do I just need to resubmit it? And the answer to this one was resubmit it. And for those who are interested, unfortunately, that tree is no longer standing. It went down with Matthew in 2015. Okay, so here we have a bridge to fog. And there's a theme emerging here that I will tell you in a second, because I seem to have, well, I'll tell you now. I seem to have less luck with the beaches judges than I did with the Jacksonville judges. Because here's another example of something that I put in to one of the Jacksonville competitions, and it got a ribbon. It's a foggy morning at the beaches at Bridge, and I just caught the light right, and it was really a rare scene, and I'm glad I got it right. Any event, won a ribbon in JCC competition, brought it out to the beach, and the guy said, "I don't like the tint." I was okay. But I did like the tint because without introducing color, because it's a monochrome photograph, I did it because it represented the color of the bridge without introducing extraneous colors, maybe from trees or other objects in the scene. That was why I did it that way. So there's one where I already knew that I had something going, so I had already gotten a ribbon for it. So I don't think I ever resubmitted it. Now we get into the part where, kind of like the guy who said I don't like tattoos, but fortunately my photo grew on him. Now we've got a Veterans Day celebration going on, and I caught these people leaving the celebration at the end, and the woman saw me there with the camera and started waving her flag, so that was lovely. I put this into a competition at JCC. The judge said all sorts of nice things about it, and then said what I call the magic words, "but it's too common to give an award to." It happens. My photos apparently antagonize certain judges in the world, is all I can figure out. If they knew me personally, they'd have a reason, but the photos I didn't think should cause that response. But in any event, I looked at it and I said, "No, let's try this again," and I did, and the next judge gave it an award. All right, so I didn't change a thing. I just put it back in, and somebody liked it better. Okay, this is one of my favorite waterfall pictures. This is Blackwater Falls in West Virginia, and if you've ever seen pictures of Blackwater Falls, if you've ever been there, normally you see kind of multiple falls because the water flow isn't that heavy. I got lucky. I went during a season where they were having monsoons there. I mean, the water was just flowing amazingly at all the waterfalls in West Virginia. The only problem was getting a dry day to shoot them. So I put this one in, and I had received a lot of feedback on it that was very good. And I put it into a JCC competition, and the judge looked at it, got to it, and he said, "Yeah, it's a nice photo, you got the water flowing right and all of that." Now, I want to preface this comment because this is a judge who I know. He didn't know it was my photo until we got to the judging, but we occasionally exchange barbs, verbally. All in good fun, mind you, but he looked at me and said, "But a gorilla could have taken this picture." I thought at least it should be, like a primate with more skills, but he went for gorilla. At which point I couldn't believe my ears, but I went, okay. And then he justified it. He said, "Look, everybody takes this picture. I know the platform you were on." Well, actually, he didn't. There's a platform down here. If you look at the lower left side where there are some trees, that's where the platform is, and I just took a position to cover it so that wouldn't show up in my photo, and I was further up the trail, but I didn't bother to tell him that. He had obviously made his decision. And so then I said, "No, this is not a gorilla picture." So I submitted it to F3C in monochrome, and it got a blue ribbon. So once again, you gotta know when your work is, when you believe in it and it's better than primate level, you gotta do something with that. And finally, before I get to questions, I'm going to give you a simple guideline for appraising judges. This is what I found to be useful in terms of their opinions. If a judge selected 2 or more of my photos in a competition, that was a good judge. If he selected or she selected none, that was a bad judge. And if they picked only one, that was a quirky judge. So keep all of that in mind as you go down the road. And just remember that judging, like anything else, is subjective. And if you hear something that needs to be improved, you do it. And if you hear something that just sounds wrong to you, then try again. You know, you've got... And now Sean is going to talk about how to do things in post-processing to get the greatest advantage in competition.
Yay! I will release you from your microphone. And Sean, I'll just put this one on you and take the other one off. How's that? Guess what? The people on YouTube, you know, we have lots of